Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to return to Jinjer today, who has recently put out a new single. We haven't checked out Jinjer in a few years now, and that's actually because their last album was in 2021. I don't know why it seemed like they put something out recently, but they didn't. That was Wallflowers 3 years ago. I don't know, man. Time's weird. So anyways, we're going to check out their new song, which is called Someone's Daughter. Let's dive into this and see what Jinjer is bringing to the table today.
You teach me how to be a man, though I am someone's daughter. The path of warrior was set for me.
I like the drum patterns here. Strong bass presence. I mean, those. Bringing in those pockets of less sound, not necessarily silence. Yeah, that was a cool walk down.
So my gentleness is turning to rigidity. And once off, the skin is nothing but the scale.
Those little bass walk-ups.
One by one, I lead in equal fights eventually. The goodness is broken.
That bass lick changes every repetition, doesn't it? Straightforward rhythms with the bass popping in. Yeah. Okay, I can get behind this section. All the instruments moving so wildly and her vocals holding out these notes. The contrast of staccato versus legato writing. Okay, what? Holy mashuga, Batman. Halftime to wrap this up. I think we're coming close to the ending. The staging of those cymbals is really nice. I like the vocal layering here too, and the placement of the two tracks. Okay. Okay. This is pretty much what I expect from Jinjer still after having listened to Wallflowers. They've definitely found a style that they're very comfortable with, which I find interesting because where they started off with, was it Inhale, Don't Breathe, shifting to Cloud Factory, shifting to King of Nothing, there was a lot of evolution across those first three albums. And then I feel they sort of stagnated a little bit. This is a lot closer to even Macro, but very much Wallflowers. Um, a lot closer to that than King of Nothing was to Cloud Factory or Inhale Don't Breathe. Um, and come to think of it, I wonder how much of that has to do with band member stability. They had a lot of changes in those first three albums between drummers and guitarists. And since then, they have been this stable four-person band with the same members. So maybe it was less about the band exploring their music and more about the current members of the band. What did they bring to the table? Regardless, though, this is very expected stuff for me. That is primarily that we have some cool polyrhythmic ideas coming from the drums. There's a strong sense of groove in the drumming. They are always there if you just want to turn your brain off and just jam along to the song. There's always going to be that backbeat for you to listen to, but there's always some interesting things going on with ghost notes and extra snare hits and utilizing cymbals in tasteful ways. Some of the fills are really interesting here, varying a little bit into the more progressive side, not necessarily that I would say I would classify this as progressive metal, but definitely a bit more progressive than your standard mainstream metal bands. The fills that most of those drummers are going to be utilizing. There is something that, at least to me, allows Jinjer to be distinct and sit above their contemporaries in the mainstream metal world. As far as the drums are concerned, the guitars are very riff heavy, focused on texture and feeling, atmosphere over everything else. There are very few memorable riffs, I think, in here. A lot of the guitar work just tends to be low and bouncing between a couple of notes where I don't really think the notes mean much. Don't mean as much as the distance between them, having low, middle, and a high tone, regardless of what notes they are, so we can bounce between them in rhythmically interesting ways to create some cool syncopation. Um, that's not to say that I think the riffs are bad in here, they just aren't the focus. The band is very rhythmically oriented, and that's why the drums get to be highlighted a little bit here, and why at least what I hear primarily from the guitars is their rhythmic and textural elements. The bass does what the bassist does. I wish I could remember everybody's name. You think I've been listening to this group for at least 4 years now. Um, you think I'd start to remember their names. But anyways, the bassist is just killer as always. I think I brought up the moving bass lines multiple times on this track. To me, what I really love about this is that something we don't see too much in the world of modern mainstream metal, but even in the realm of metal in general, regardless of era or popularity, is a bass lead. The bassist, it just continues to be the lead instrument aside from the vocalist in Jinjer. And there are some really cool lines in here. Pretty much any time that we need something melodic alongside the rhythmic and textural writing, the bass gets to do that line. Aside from, the lead, the vocals carrying the lead melody. But if we need counterpoint, if we need ornamentation, if we have a little, one bar melodic movement in a 4-bar phrase, the bass is going to get it every time. And I really love that. Even when we got to what I think is the bridge, and we'll get on to the structure of this in a second, it's the bass who leads. The drums and guitar give us this constant 16th note drive. It's the bass that gives us the syncopation. It's the bass that gives us the accent pattern. It's the bass that gives us the melody in that section. And I'm a huge fan of that. I came in at the very beginning of this reaction journey telling you all that I really like bass work. You know, coming from a jazz background, the bass leads the band in almost every song. I played bass in a rock band. I love bass. It just sounds good, and there's just not a lot of bands that allow it to do what Jinjer allows their bassists to do. And again, it's nothing surprising now. This is how they've written music for a few years. And it's what I've come to expect. And then of course we have the vocalist, and she has wonderful vocals, both in the cleans, the compressed cleans, the high harshes, the growls. I said both and I named four. The vocalist is just very dexterous and knows when to use all of their vocal styles for maximum effect. This is Jinjer. If you've listened to any Jinjer in the last half decade, give or take, you know what you're in for on this. And there is a positive and a negative for that. Comfort music is definitely a thing. You know, we've talked about this a lot. Whenever we check out post-hardcore or emo music, I feel right at home reacting to these bands. Even though I've never heard them before, I'm very familiar with their style, and I immediately fall into it, and just enjoy it. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with a band knowing what their audience wants, knowing how they want to write, and just leaning into that. Unfortunately, I'm kind of walking away from this video not knowing if I want to dig into more. Macro and Wallflowers kind of bounced off me a little bit, where I still spin Cloud Factory and King of Nothing every now and then. There's something about their new sound that just doesn't quite click for me in all of my moods like their older stuff does. But again, that's the double-edged sword of it. It is comfortable, but it's also something people have heard before, so, you know, it has to be something people really like. And it's just not me as a target audience. However, one thing I really liked about this song is the general growth and structure of it. If you were to ask me what the structure of this is based off of the vocals, or at least my perception of the vocals based on the vocalist's melody and the few lines I picked up, I would say verse, chorus, bridge, outro, which is pretty cool in and of itself. Usually we return back to a verse or a chorus to wrap the song up. It's the classic A, B, C, B pattern, but here we bring a D section to the end of the song. The bridge moves into another entirely new section that wraps the track up. I thought this was very cool. They're not breaking ground with this, but it's also just not something you see too much, again, in the mainstream sphere. I think it's one of the things that gives Jinjer their longevity and their popularity, is that they're just progressive enough to edge them out over their contemporaries, but they don't really push into the realms of progressive metal, proper, which allows them to have that palatability that works well with your general metal audience. And this is one of those areas for that, is tacking a brand new section onto the end of a song rather than the tried and true concept of bringing the chorus back. But if you ask me what the structure is based on the instrumentation, it's a completely linear song. I think the choruses have the same music, but both of the verses have different written music to them, and those verses also feel to me to be linear in a way. Like I mentioned, during the second verse, we have, I think it was 4-bar phrases. I think that's what it was. And it was 16 bars total. So we have 4 groups of these 4. At the end of every group, the bass would do this little lead line in that final bar. But I think every one of those was different. It allowed the song to feel like it was progressing somewhere. It wasn't just a cyclical loop. It was just that we continued to return back to a home base before exploring a new direction, to the home base, to exploring a new direction, home base, exploring a new direction. But I also feel like if you take all of those punctuating riffs from the bass and put them in a series, you're actually going to find a melody out of that. It wasn't just random ideas. There was a rising and falling pattern there. I thought that was really clever. I'm going to have to listen to it again and to that verse specifically, those 16 bars, and isolate those bass licks and put them together and see if I do hear a melody out of it, because that's kind of the feeling I got while listening to it on this first time. And so not only do we have something that fits more of an A, B, C, B, D, E pattern, so we do have these two choruses that are similar, but everything else is linear. We also have in the sections themselves an element of linearity too, which allows the song, at least to me, to feel like it is consistently moving forward. There are callbacks at times, but for the most part, it feels like a linear trip. It never really feels like we're moving backwards or cycling in any way. While, of course, creating cycles in here, we do have these 4-bar loops. We do return to the chorus twice. There are elements of bringing concepts back, and it's this linear cyclicality that I think works really well. Again, not necessarily sitting on any end of a spectrum, but finding a place in the middle that is just progressive enough to be interesting, but also very palatable for a general audience, utilizing a small variation on a standardized component. It's beautiful, and I love how it works against this idea of the vocals, where the verse vocal line is identical from the two verses, if I remember correctly. And so, like I said, you get kind of two different structures depending on what instruments you're listening to. There's also the general growth of the song that starts out very light. We have the clean vocals, we have the lighter bass focus, the lighter guitar work. By the time we get into the chorus, we have an explosiveness. We have this nice light versus heavy contrast that we hear a lot in mainstream metal. But then we get into the second verse, and it's also big and dark and heavy. And this allows the song to have this gradual rise up. As the song progresses on, we have a linearity of intensity. We have a linear rise of heaviness and weight. And the song gets more and more dark as we progress through it. In fact, the beginning of the song is a lot more complex rhythmically than the end of the song, where we shift to very straightforward, static, rigid, rhythmic ideas. Just that 4 on the floor, emphasize every beat of the bar, especially when we hit that final halftime feel. It's about removing the lightness and dexterity and levity of the song and replacing it with heaviness and weight and grittiness and darkness. And so we have this rising, escalating intensity throughout the entire track that's taking us on this linear journey with these small cyclical callbacks. And it just feels right. It is a narrative journey on its own. I have no idea what the song is about, but the music absolutely took me on this little tale of rising intensity. Is there anything else you want to add to this? I don't think so. I'm going to check out some lyrics, see what's going on there, see if we can't pair it back to the music at all. I don't think so. Jinjer's not usually a band that incorporates thematic ties between their music and lyrics, at least not in what I've checked out, but there's always the case that they're going to try something new. So let me dive into that, and then we'll wrap this video up. Okay, this is something I totally forgot about, which I didn't recognize until I started reading the lyrics and seeing all of the exclamation points put at the end of the track, is that I was talking about rising escalation of weight and moving away from complex things to, rigid, heavy ideas. But we also move away from the very legato, light, clean vocals into the harshes towards the end of the song. We even have a point in the middle of the track where we get both of them layering the cleans with the harshes, and then we have only harshes until the very final stanza of the track. There is this transition from light to heavy. Even in the vocals, everything just works together on this theme, and there's a good reason why. The song is about that. Well, thematically, anyways, it's about somebody having to become hardened in order to survive. The opening stanzas, or 2 stanzas, I think, sets everything up. Just reading these, you can get a complete gist of what the song is about. It says, "You teach me how to be a man, though I am someone's daughter. The path of warrior was set for me and I had to try on the armor, but it doesn't suit me and it feels heavy. I'm frightened and ashamed. This person is trained how to do combat. It says, I have to combat the world alone. I have to swing my sword alone. They're thrust into a world where they have to fight, and it's not what they want to do. They're forced to become someone they're not. And we see this transformation in stanza 4, I think. It says, my gentleness is turned into rigidity, and once soft, the skin is nothing but the scale. One by one, I lead unequal fights. Eventually, the beauty's nose is broken, and I faint. It is about wanting to be soft and caring and to have an easy life, maybe even possibly. I don't want to read too much into it, but definitely a life without conflict. And is instead, they're forced into conflict consistently just to exist. Later on into the track, I believe once the harsh vocals have kicked in, it says, oh, brutal world, I'm not your enemy. This role of warrior brings nothing but misery. If a woman's wings are trimmed and her radiance is dimmed, then this is over. Finally, we see with a force to be reckoned with a force to be reckoned, to be no longer the second. I am no longer a daughter. I eat them for breakfast and lunch. I have the audacity to throw the first punch. I dwell in the shadows. I sleep in the light, and I throw the first punch. It is about somebody who does not want to be a warrior through necessity, becoming a fighter, and not just any fighter, but a formidable one who is not afraid to attack first because they know what happens if you wait and allow the first punch to be landed on you. It's a tragic song. And I think the music and the escalation of the intensity and the way that it starts versus the way that it ends is a perfect showcasing of this. As I mentioned, we have the dexterous bass lines towards the first half of the track. We have the light lyrics. We have the cool, complex drumming ideas. But by the end of the song, we're just in a big breakdown, halftime. 4 on the floor, heavy emphasis on downbeats, very little dexterity to the song. It is very abrasive and blunt by the end of the track, and the vocalist is screaming at us that they now throw the first punch. It's very clear what the song is about, and like I said, everything comes together on every level. It's really well done. It makes me ready for this album. It doesn't have a date in the description of when it comes out. It just says that there's more coming very soon. I don't know if that means we'll have an album this year or next, but I'm eagerly anticipating it. I don't know if musically it's going to connect with me, but I think lyrically I'm really going to enjoy it, especially if they continue to create these thematic ties like they did on this track. So those are my thoughts. Jinjer's Someone's Daughter. Let me know what you thought of this song. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on, maybe just have your own thoughts, opinions, and perspectives about the track. Put all that stuff down in the description box. Above that put it down in the comments section. Above that in the description box is a link for Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to check out an entire album. Sunday, we'll have our live stream at 11 a.m. EST. And then Monday we'll return for the second part of Two-Parters theme, continuing to look at songs that are grouped into a part 1 and a part 2. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.